Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Comone. He personally offers and leads private and public tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the Springfield Third Baptist Church, located in Springfield, Massachusetts. So where is this church located, and what's nearby?
All right. This church is a nice little church. It's kind of easy to find. It's on 149 Walnut Street in Springfield, Massachusetts. And its history is very complex, and we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about the parsonage that's off to its right-hand side, and how nice the church has been kept, because its grounds are nice, the church is nice itself. And what's nearby, right to its side, is Barrows Park, Barrows, and that's a neighborhood park and then residential across the street. But down Pendleton Avenue, behind it, there's another street, and another church. And that church, it kind of is a match set of these two. You can see one right behind it. The other one behind it is called the Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. All right, so there's two churches in a row right off the side of Pendleton Street at this corner of Walnut. So it's easy to find, but there's a lot of really cool things to find around here. So it's good to walk around this church and the back church and the park all at the same time.
And what is the history of this church?
All right, it has a very complex history, of course. And you can walk around the grounds of this church on the outside, and you can see cornerstones. Well, the first cornerstone you meet says that the church was founded in 1869. That means the congregation of people coming together for the Springfield Third Baptist Church was formed in document and with people meeting at people's houses in 1869. All right, that does not mean anything about the church you're in now. Now, the first church they would ever get, they started to erect in 1891 and was finished in 1892. And that was built on Williams Street in Springfield. It's not there anymore, so you're not going to go out and find that one. But that's when they first had a place to meet beyond the people's houses. Right? So 1892, they really got strong. But they formed in 1869. And notice it's right after the Civil War, because people were coming up from the South after the Civil War. Now, what about the actual physical church you're looking at right now? Okay, and this church right here is from 1939. So they stayed at their William Street church for 47 years. But even then, they only made a basement here. And that's why the basement of this church looks different from the upper parts. It's a very strong walled basement, and that's all they had. Now, 1961, finally, the upper floors were made, and that's why the upper floors architectural style looks so modern and simplistic, because it came so late on. So the dates that are very important, some are on the cornerstones, all right, and if you walk around, there's quite a few cornerstones. There is one on the basement that says 1939, and then there's another one right on the wall above it, showing when they started to build the upper portions with brick, and it says 1958. It wasn't finished in 1961. So if you go around here, you're going to find at least 3 cornerstones embedded into the walls of this church, and you're going to find all these years, 4 different years. So keep those in mind, and I keep them on my webpage for you to help understand the history of this church. I told you the history is very complex, and it's still here, and it still has a parsonage nearby. But it also has a couple of plaques, and it has one more cornerstone on the landscape itself. And so we'll talk about that coming up.
And really quick, before we continue with the rest of our interview, just to fill our listeners in, if you want to find out more information or sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops on each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for more other inquiries or private tours, you can email him directly at bobcat4214B@yahoo.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new videos and podcasts posted daily. And his tours made for fun, educational activities for families and group parties. So getting back to our interview, where is the parsonage and what is it like?
All right, so the right side, as you face into the church, the right side has the parsonage where you look at, and it's a nice looking parsonage. And its architectural style, of course, is different. Remember that the church itself was only a basement for a very, very long time, and that's why it's different. So, the parsonage is at 116 King Street, right, and it's inside of an 1865 Victorian home. And then also at 80 King Street, another home of that year, there's probably a building that might have been used in the parsonage along the way. So it's important to keep in mind that the history of this church is extremely complex. But it's well worth walking around, and I'll address those points in the next question.
And what is the church like after all these years?
Okay, it's still beautiful after all these years. The basement still obviously is well made with these granite blocks, and it's well constructed overall. Now, there's going to be, as you walk around the landscape, another cornerstone. So there's three embedded right into the walls of this church, with 4 years overall. But as you walk off to the right, there's another cornerstone in a very deep red color, and it says Third Baptist Church on it. That's the cornerstone from the former William Street Church. And so you got 4 cornerstones right in this area for you to read off of. Now, also in this area, of course, they have the name of the church itself. That's both put onto the church with little letters and also with a plaque. It tells you Third Baptist Church. All right, but lastly, there's a plaque associated with this church, and that plaque, I'll read it to you, partly at least. The Third Baptist Church, donated by, and then it has the Reverend Nathaniel Smith Sr., and then it gives you a list of deacons, trustees, brothers, sisters, all right, members who gave a lot to this church. And what they've done is put a plaque up for them to tell you who was very strongly associated with this area. And that's wonderful they would do that. So it's a nice church to go to visit, to walk around its back side to see a couple of its old parsonages still there. And you have to walk up to them. And to see that church in back that I mentioned, the Methodist Episcopal Church. Right? So do all those things, and you also get a sense of how well constructed the area is.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can check out more of his podcasts on his website, as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to stay up to date with new podcasts and videos posted daily. And thank you for tuning in.